In the estate, he naturally had to pretend, but in Peach Blossom Pavilion, he didn't need to pretend and could be himself. This was truly surprising. As they were eating lamb soup, Margaret Seymour's illness took her life swiftly. The entire Maple Woods court was in tears, and it was said the lady of the house personally went to handle the situation. After all, with the estate preparing for a wedding, Margaret Seymour's death couldn't be revealed and had to be discreetly taken care of. Emily Crawford fainted twice from crying, while Claire Crawford watched the carriage depart silently. "Are you satisfied now?" Emily Crawford asked Claire Crawford. Naturally, she hated Claire Crawford. If it weren't for her, her mother wouldn't have had to die. But Claire Crawford glanced at Emily Crawford and said, "Emily Crawford, every decision is your own, you can't blame others. You chose for your mother to die so you could marry Prince Lance. You have no right to speak to me like this." Margaret Seymour could have lived, but Emily Crawford didn't dare to gamble. She had invested so much effort just to marry Prince Lance, and with Claire Crawford causing a scene, how could she dare take the risk? "Indeed, you calculated well, Claire Crawford. Both you and I are the least significant people in this estate, yet we both ended up as princesses." Emily Crawford still believed she would rise high in the future. She felt that becoming a princess would end her days of suffering, her words tinged with a bit of joy. Claire Crawford looked at Emily Crawford and thought this woman was truly heartless. To mention anything else, Margaret Seymour's death didn't seem to affect Emily Crawford much. But Eric Stewart remarked, "Some people are more ruthless and cruel than men." Claire Crawford roughly understood what the other person meant. More ruthless? Emily Crawford? Claire Crawford didn't say anything further, but some things were still different. Currently, Emily Crawford has not yet married Prince Lance. Once she marries him, certain things can be done. For instance, if Emily Crawford has ties with Prince Lance, any future confrontations with the Crawford family will naturally involve Prince Lance. Therefore, even if Claire Crawford wants revenge, with Margaret Seymour already dealt with, the others must be handled gradually and patiently. Whether some people have dark hearts or bright ones will be seen in the future, Claire Crawford remarked with a faint smile, just as she met the gaze of the matron, who looked at her as if she were an enemy. It seemed she already knew. Margaret Seymour was intelligent enough to be confined in Maple Woods Court under concrete evidence without the Crawford family head taking her life. Why would she suddenly commit suicide? The matron didn't believe Margaret Seymour acted on impulse, she feared her heart was more ambitious than anyone else's. Thus, the matron was certain Claire Crawford had secretly intervened and even investigated what Claire had said to Margaret Seymour. "Claire, I have something I want to discuss with you," the matron smiled, glancing at Eric Stewart, feeling somewhat reluctant to confront him directly. After all, Eric Stewart's kindness to Claire Crawford made her hesitant to speak. So, she wished to speak privately with Claire Crawford. With Margaret Seymour dead, the past should be left behind rather than pursued further. Continuing to pursue it wouldn't benefit anyone, right? Therefore, the matron needed to know Claire Crawford's thoughts, whether she intended to continue causing trouble or let things rest. After all, she had been involved in some matters and didn't want to continue making enemies with Claire Crawford. "Madam, is there something important you wish to discuss with me?" Claire Crawford asked innocently, as if unaware of the matron's intentions. The matron felt awkward. Claire had visited Margaret Seymour earlier, so what had Margaret said? Did she speak ill of the matron? After all, Claire Crawford was about to marry Eric Stewart and would soon become a princess. The matron didn't want her relationship with Claire Crawford to become too strained. Nothing much, just wanted to chat. "You see, you're about to get married, and if your mother were alive, she would surely be very happy," the matron mentioned Beatrice Stewart. Back then, she was too lazy to deal with Beatrice Stewart, but Margaret Seymour was not one to tolerate others. As for the matron, she turned a blind eye and didn't care whether Beatrice Stewart lived or died. So, she watched as Beatrice was harmed by Margaret Seymour and even secretly helped a little. After all, if Beatrice Stewart had a child, the matron's status would be threatened. But since she didn't act directly, the matron felt Claire Crawford shouldn't hold a grudge against her. "Indeed, if my mother were alive, my brother would likely be married with children by now, and that would be fulfilling," Claire Crawford said calmly,
causing the matron to feel a bit uneasy.
Once certain things are spoken, they can never be taken back. Whether Claire Crawford harbors resentment is her own concern, but if that resentment leads to trouble for the matron, it wouldn't be worth it.
It's been many years, things should be left in the past, and people should look forward, the matron said.
Claire Crawford understood her meaning.
One should look forward, but only after settling past scores.
Looking forward without addressing the past holds no appeal.
Chapter 65, the wedding night. On the grand wedding day, although Prince Lance appeared infinitely glamorous on the outside, he still couldn't compare to the standout Eric Stewart. One could abandon their pride and wholeheartedly treat Claire Crawford with utmost devotion. From the betrothal gifts to the wedding attire, Claire Crawford's were far more exquisite than Emily Crawford's by countless measures. That day, Claire Crawford wore a long gown with 10 different dark purple patterns, draped with a thin red phoenix veil, and the wide hem was embroidered with light gold patterns. Her hair was neatly and simply styled, with the rest cascading down her neck, and a small light brown gemstone adorned her forehead, adding just the right touch. A golden phoenix hairpin was placed on her head, jingling with each graceful step.
Emily Crawford appeared much plainer. Although everything was prepared by the Internal Affairs Office, it still couldn't match Eric Stewart's genuine affection.
On that day, Eric Stewart was overjoyed, holding Claire Crawford's hand as she was led into the bridal sedan chair, making it evident to everyone how much Eric Stewart cared for Claire Crawford.
She was indeed Eric Stewart's treasure, further making others envious of Vincent's fortune. Throughout the Duke's residence, lanterns and decorations were everywhere, but the only person not happy was the Duke's aunt, Lady White.
Though not particularly close to the Emperor, she had raised Eric Stewart to adulthood. Lady White had always lived in the Duke's residence and had previously spent half a year at the Manhwa temple praying for blessings. Over the years, she had taken care of Eric Stewart in every aspect, from clothing to daily needs. Her husband had died on the battlefield, and she had a son, only 16, who was somewhat simple-minded. Lady White was very displeased with Eric Stewart marrying Claire Crawford, Vincent's daughter. "Mother, what troubles you?" asked Robin White, Lady White's son, timidly glancing at his mother. As soon as she furrowed her brow, he became anxious. Lady White had returned from the Manhwa temple only to hear that Eric Stewart intended to marry Claire Crawford. She had offered all the advice she could, yet it had no effect. Although Lady White had helped organize the wedding for the Duke's residence, she remained quite angry. "I watched Eric grow up, and now he marries Vincent's second daughter. I wanted him to sever ties with that girl after using her, but he secretly proposed and made her his main wife," Lady White said, her dislike for the Marquis household extending to Claire Crawford. Robin White looked at his mother and cautiously said, "Mother, perhaps the third Miss Crawford truly has some outstanding qualities that captivated Eric so."
"Eric isn't impulsive."
Robin White's words left Lady White somewhat doubtful.
Indeed, Eric Stewart couldn't afford to make a wrong move now.
His position was precarious, and the Emperor didn't favor him. The third Miss Crawford was supposed to marry Prince Lance, yet now she was marrying Eric Stewart. Lady White was very wary of Claire Crawford. "Eric can marry anyone, and I hope he has someone by his side who will wholeheartedly care for him, but the status of that second daughter is too sensitive and might cause trouble in the future."
Robin White dared not say more, as he never dared to contradict his mother. "All right, finish your work and go do your homework."
"It's just a second daughter, a little ceremony will suffice," Lady White concluded, and Robin White quickly retreated, shaking his head. He still wanted to see if the new sister-in-law was beautiful, as he had heard she was a great beauty, according to Eric. At the entrance of the Duke's residence, Eric Stewart personally welcomed Claire Crawford from the carriage amidst the lively commotion outside. Claire Crawford was quite exhausted. She hadn't expected that getting married here would be so tiring. From morning until now, she had been to the palace, met the Empress Dowager, the Emperor, and the Empress, followed all sorts of protocols, and felt her knees were swollen, and she hadn't even eaten yet. "I've come to fetch you, little Crawford," Eric Stewart announced, and amidst the cheers of everyone, he lifted Claire Crawford up. Everyone laughed, saying Eric Stewart spoiled Claire Crawford too much, not even letting her walk a single step.
They entered the inner chamber, and Eric Stewart set Claire Crawford down. The formalities involving the gourd, scale, jade scepter, and warm incense burner were completed under the matchmaker's guidance.
After Claire Crawford revealed her captivating
Face to Eric Stuart, the ceremony was finally over.
The servants, being quick-witted, swiftly left the room, leaving just the two of them. Marrying into the Qin royal residence, you seem much more obedient.
Is the Qin princess of mine feeling shy?
Eric Stuart was very excited. The entire room filled with a festive atmosphere made him feel as if he were dreaming. Claire Crawford was also bashful, glancing at Eric Stuart. Even though it was supposed to be a fake marriage, he had made such a big deal out of it, leaving her a bit at a loss. In her past life, her grand wedding with Lance Stuart was also magnificent, but it ended in blood-stained white robes, a memory she couldn't forget. Now, the whole room was so vividly red that she could hardly open her eyes.
Busy all day, I'm really tired.
Claire Crawford sat on the wedding bed, perhaps truly exhausted today, her eyes gentle and soft, like a young maiden from a noble family. I've instructed the little chef to make you some late-night snacks. Don't move, Eric Stuart told Claire Crawford, then took out a small porcelain bottle from his chest and knelt on one knee in front of her.
Claire Crawford was taken aback. Aren't royal people very particular about their status?
Yet Eric Stuart disregarded everything, knelt on one knee before Claire Crawford, removed her shoes and socks, and rolled up her pant leg to her knee. Today's formalities were cumbersome, and I couldn't defy orders, so you had to endure the hardship, Eric Stuart said as he poured the medicine into his hand, warmed it, and gently massaged Claire Crawford's knee. At that moment, Claire Crawford truly didn't know what to do. Everything seemed awkward until Hong Mai from the Qin royal residence brought in the late-night snacks and naturally saw Eric Stuart kneeling on the ground, applying medicine to Claire Crawford's knee.
Your Highness, what are you doing? Let Hong Mai handle these tasks.
Hong Mai placed the bowl of chicken noodles on the table and then bowed to Claire Crawford.
Servant greets the princess consort. I am Hong Mai and will be serving by your side.
I was assigned by Lady White to take care of you. If you need anything at the prince's residence, please let me know. Claire Crawford looked at Hong Mai, her first thought being whether this maid was too clever. She pushed Eric Stuart aside and sat down next to the small table. The prince knows I prefer clever people around me, but I'm used to Willow Green serving me. It would be better if she continued to do so.
Eric Stuart nodded and instructed, that's fine, outsiders might not understand your temperament and provoke you. Hong Mai, just follow the princess consort's instructions.
Hong Mai was momentarily surprised but then smiled and nodded. On the table were 2 cups of wedding wine, which Hong Mai kept glancing at, knowing they had to be drunk.
Hong Mai, you may leave.
In this regard, you lack Willow Green's insight.
Eric Stuart understood his aunt's intentions, but today he didn't want to force Claire Crawford.
No one knew better than he how stubborn Claire Crawford could be. There should be no coercion between them. Hong Mai glanced at Claire Crawford and then smiled as she left. Claire Crawford ate small bites of chicken noodles, saying nothing, lost in thought. Eric Stuart handed her a cup of wine, which she drank.
After drinking, she looked at Eric Stuart, slightly confused. Wedding wine?
I had it switched earlier. What are you afraid of?
I am a gentleman and will never force anyone.
Eric Stuart said, drinking the other cup himself.
Claire Crawford's face flushed slightly. A gentleman?
Then go sleep outside, sleep wherever you want tonight.
Don't even think about it. I will sleep here tonight and always. If you try to kick me out, aren't you afraid of rumors saying you can't keep your husband?
Well, Claire Crawford didn't care about rumors, but she didn't want endless trouble either.
How did Eric Stuart become so clever? She hadn't even said anything.
After finishing her noodles, Claire Crawford felt utterly exhausted. She had woken up early and knelt all day. No matter how strong, her body couldn't withstand such strain. So, Eric Stuart slept outside, while Claire Crawford slept inside. The next morning, Claire Crawford was awakened by Hong Mai's urgent call, which also woke Eric Stuart. Her leg was resting on him, which was quite embarrassing. Your Highness, Princess Consort, Lady White requests your presence. Since Hong Mai mentioned Lady White, Claire Crawford had no choice but to get up despite her sleepy state. Eric Stuart frowned and explained once they were alone, in the prince's residence, my aunt is the kindest to me. There were things Eric Stuart couldn't say much about, but Lady White was the kindest to him, and he regarded her as his own mother. ###Chapter 66, You're just an ordinary daughter. Claire Crawford understood the intentions of Lady White, but what time was it?
The sky hadn't even brightened yet. Could it be that she stayed up all night?
Fortunately, Eric Stewart had explained, and no matter what, Claire wouldn't stoop to argue with an old lady. Now that she was the princess of Eric Stewart, sharing both the glory and shame with the prince's household, it was likely that Vincent would demand more and more, and soon, they would have to divide with the Marquis residence. But for now, the most important thing was to get past Lady White. Eric Stewart and Claire Crawford went to meet her, and Lady White, like an old witch, seemed ready to devour her.
"Aunt, what are you doing so early in the morning? Wouldn't it be better to sleep a bit more at this time?"
Eric Stewart voiced Claire Crawford's dissatisfaction about waking up early. But Lady White ignored him, while Robin White, dragged out to study, looked pitifully at Eric Stewart. When he saw Claire Crawford, Robin White was truly stunned. He had always been confined in the prince's residence or under Lady White's watchful eye, so seeing Claire Crawford, with her new and beautiful face, left him dumbfounded.
"Is this my sister-in-law?"
"Eric, you really have an eye for people," Robin White said bluntly, staring at Claire Crawford almost drooling. Eric Stewart looked at Robin White and then walked over to ruffle his hair, saying, "Robin, if you keep staring at your sister-in-law like that, I'll get jealous." Robin White snapped back to reality, thinking he just liked beautiful sisters, or rather, beautiful sisters-in-law. Before he could say anything, Lady White spoke. "On the first day of marriage, waking up so late is not what a virtuous wife should do."
"Does the Marquis residence have such rules too?"
Lady White clearly targeted Claire Crawford, but Eric Stewart knew she intended to cause trouble, so he spoke up. "Aunt, we'll tidy up and head to the palace."
"Why tire yourself out like this?"
Eric Stewart defended Claire Crawford, knowing what kind of person Lady White was, and wouldn't let her bully Claire. Robin White continued to stare at Claire Crawford, probably having never seen anyone as beautiful. "Let's tidy up and head to the palace," Lady White said, allowing Claire Crawford to leave. But Claire knew very well that the old lady wasn't acting out of kindness. Dragging her here so early couldn't be without a reason. She was sure Lady White was waiting to act later. As they left the room, Robin White followed closely, looking at Claire Crawford and saying, "Eric, you're amazing to marry such an incredible lady."
"What do children know?
They only see beauty," but Lady White overheard Robin White's words. She emerged from the room and scolded, "Robin, you're still young.
You can't judge people by appearances. Now, go back and do your homework." "All right."
Robin White returned to his room, feeling both aggrieved and self-pitying, while glancing at Claire Crawford and shaking his head. Eric Stewart held Claire Crawford's hand, as if to announce her status at the prince's residence. As dawn broke, Eric Stewart and Claire Crawford entered the palace, where they saw Prince Lance with Emily Crawford. Emily Crawford's face looked quite unsightly, as if she had been through a shock. No one knew what happened on the wedding night, but her expression was so bad it was indescribable.
"Oh my, isn't this Prince Lance's wife?" Eric Stewart deliberately said, gently holding Claire Crawford's hand, showing off. Prince Lance was forced to marry Emily Crawford, so he couldn't possibly be happy.
Therefore, Eric Stewart flaunted deliberately, almost driving Emily Crawford to anger.
Claire Crawford, after getting married, maintained a gentle demeanor, ignoring Eric Stewart's antics, and chose not to say anything.
Emily Crawford gritted her teeth, glaring at Claire Crawford, who seemed to be in even better spirits after the wedding night. Prince Lance glanced at Eric Stewart, but paid more attention to Claire Crawford. After all, men tend to reminisce about what they can't have, and Prince Lance was no exception.
"Let's go pay respects to father and mother," Prince Lance said. Eric Stewart and Claire Crawford might not be considered family, but Claire Crawford didn't care about such things. Royal Consort Florence bestowed many gifts upon Emily Crawford, mostly premium pregnancy supplements, while Claire Crawford's side seemed rather pitiful.
The palace maids, who were adept at reading the prevailing winds, naturally disliked Claire Crawford now that she wasn't favored. Of course, Claire Crawford didn't mind. What concerned her was how to deal with Lady White upon returning. That was the real challenge. So, after exchanging a few polite words with Royal Consort Florence, she found an excuse to leave the room. As a result, she encountered Royal Consort Florence's daughter, a young girl who was clearly not gentle. She wore an almond-colored dress with poppy flowers, a dark brown skirt embroidered with daffodils, and a light yellow cloak
embroidered with flowers.
Her black hair was styled in a floral bun, adorned with a jade hairpin. Her slender fingers wore gold bracelets, her waist was embroidered with flowers, and she carried a white camellia-scented sachet, wearing pink lambskin shoes.
She looked like a fairy. Stop, are you the concubine that Prince married?
Princess Lily, always pampered by royal consort Florence, was unlike Princess Amelia, who could lead armies and was always delicate.
The person naturally approached Prince Lance, always staying beside royal consort Florence, aware of the affair between Claire Crawford and Prince Lance, and today came intentionally to cause trouble.
Claire Crawford turned to look at the person, and Hong Mai beside her reminded, "Madam, this is Princess Lily, the daughter of royal consort Florence."
Claire Crawford nodded, thinking, so what if she's a princess? So what if she's the daughter of royal consort Florence?
She is still the consort of Prince Tan with a higher status and is also her elder. However, Claire Crawford did not respond, which displeased Princess Lily, a spoiled young girl who couldn't tolerate being ignored.
Stop right there, do you not recognize your status? How dare you be disrespectful to me, the princess? You are nothing but a common concubine's daughter, how dare you look down on me? Do you believe I won't tell my father, the king?
Princess Lily said, winking at the person beside her. Consequently, the maid beside her immediately spoke up, "Consort of Prince Tan, perhaps you are unaware, but our Princess Lily is the most beloved little princess of His Majesty, it would be wise not to offend her."
What? Does this mean that as the consort of Prince Tan, she must bow to Princess Lily? Claire Crawford sneered and asked, "Willow Green, when we initially learned the rules, was it the princess who should greet the consort, or the consort who should greet the princess?"
Willow Green immediately replied, "Madam, naturally, it is the princess who should greet the consort."
Upon hearing this, Lily became furious. How could she bow to Claire Crawford?
She came today to stir up trouble and make Claire Crawford's life difficult, so how could she let her off easily?
She stepped forward and said, "You want me to greet you? You insolent fool, let me tell you, you will never get that from me. I refuse to believe I can't deal with you."
With that, Princess Lily raised her hand to slap, but unexpectedly, Claire Crawford reached out and grabbed her wrist.
Claire Crawford didn't even regard royal consort Florence, let alone Princess Lily, so why should she care? You dare to fight back? Princess Lily was in disbelief that Claire Crawford dared to resist.
She had heard that Claire Crawford was just a common concubine's daughter, so how could she dare to defy her, a beloved princess? Moreover, she had her mother and Prince Lance as well. With that, she prepared to push Claire Crawford into the nearby lotus pond to teach her a lesson. Chapter 67, Witness Blood, took lives. Lily had good intentions, but unfortunately, after pushing Claire Crawford down, Claire swiftly turned, and with a stretch of her leg, Princess Lily fell straight into the lotus pond. In this chilly spring weather, the water was bone-chillingly cold.
As Princess Lily plunged into the pond, several guards and maids jumped in to rescue her.
Meanwhile, Claire Crawford stood there, smirking coldly. The maid serving Princess Lily couldn't hold back and angrily scolded, "Lady Claire, what you did was truly inappropriate.
If His Majesty and the noble consort find out, you'll be reprimanded."
Naturally, Princess Lily's maid was wary of offending Claire Crawford, but Princess Lily was different. Once rescued by the guards, Princess Lily furiously berated Claire Crawford.
"You wench!"
Before she could finish, Eric Stewart arrived.
Having been pampered since childhood, Princess Lily wasn't afraid, knowing Eric Stewart had always been indulgent towards her. "Brother Eric, is this the wench you married?"
"She's nothing special, just someone Prince Lance discarded, yet you desire her." As Princess Lily spoke, she noticed Eric Stewart's expression change. Known for his composure, Eric Stewart had never shown such an expression before, always smiling and never offending anyone.
This made Princess Lily think he was easygoing, enough to call Claire a wench in front of him.
"Lily, you're grown now and should understand. She is the third daughter of the Marquise family, the Yinping princess conferred by His Majesty, and my rightful wife, the Lady Claire. Her hands can hold embroidery needles and draw a royal bow, having witnessed blood and taken lives."
"What did you call her?"
Eric Stewart's face was grim, unlike anything seen before, even giving off a murderous aura.
At least, Lily felt so. Brother Eric, you. Princess Lily wanted to argue, but before she could, Eric Stewart turned to her maid. If the master doesn't understand, shouldn't the servants correct her mistakes? You deserve punishment. As Eric Stewart finished, the maid was about to kneel and apologize, but he gave no chance, kicking her into the pond. In the lotus pond, Princess Lily's maid struggled, but without Eric Stewart's order, no one dared to rescue her. Brother Eric, what are you doing?
Seeing her long-serving maid kicked into the water, Princess Lily was naturally displeased and hurried to save her.
Are you all dead? Hurry and save her.
After Princess Lily spoke, Eric Stewart finally said, Lily, your servants lack loyalty.
I'm helping you by dealing with them. Next time, find better ones to serve you, don't let this old woman spoil you.
With Eric Stewart's words, no one dared to save the maid, and soon she stopped struggling. Lily's face turned pale, she hadn't expected Eric Stewart to act against those around her.
Why do you bother with a child? Claire Crawford pretended to be the good person, making Eric Stewart seem somewhat unreasonable.
On the way back, Eric Stewart continued handling military affairs, while Claire Crawford returned alone to the prince's residence. Upon arrival, Lady White sent her maid to convey a message. Lady Claire, the matron requests your presence. Claire Crawford felt a headache, unsure what the old lady wanted, but it surely wasn't good. So she replied, understood, lead the way, White. Entering, Claire Crawford found Lady White burning incense before the memorial tablet of Eric Stewart's mother, reputedly a stunning beauty who died young.
Claire Crawford, do you know your crime?
Lady White asked, leaving Claire Crawford puzzled about what the old lady referred to. She had just married in, even if she didn't understand certain customs, a reminder would suffice, so why make a big deal out of it?
Please call me Aunt.
Claire Crawford also addressed her as Aunt following Eric Stewart, but Lady White clearly disapproved. She snorted coldly and said angrily, I don't dare accept that title from you.
Claire Crawford looked at Lady White's demeanor, unsure of what had upset her. Hong Mai, present the handkerchief.
Upon hearing this, Hong Mai brought out a tray with a pristine white handkerchief, leaving Claire Crawford a bit puzzled. Traditionally, if a bride shows no signs of virginity on her wedding night, she is considered impure. You and Prince Lance have been the subject of rumors, and now it seems you are not virtuous.
The Qin royal family cannot tolerate an unchaste woman like you.
Claire Crawford roughly understood, Hong Mai, who had been on night duty, was more cunning than she appeared. So this was her plan all along, revealing her ulterior motives.
Aunt, if you want proof of virginity, you should ask the prince. Claire Crawford feigned distress, displaying the characteristic shyness of a young woman. Lady White was taken aback by Claire Crawford's words. Ha! Claire Crawford pretended to be embarrassed, then glanced at Hong Mai, saying, Aunt, do I really need to clarify this?
You can have someone check, Claire is absolutely still a virgin.
What now?
Lady White's expression grew tense, following Claire Crawford's line of thought, realizing something seemed off.
Could it be?
But looking at Claire Crawford, she quickly nodded in agreement.
Lady White was truly frightened, feeling a sense of dread, rubbing her forehead, and looking up at the ancestor's tablet, sighing, oh heavens, this is truly unfair. Sister, if you are watching over us, please bless him. Claire Crawford suppressed a laugh, knowing she had to avoid punishment today, even if it meant temporarily apologizing to Eric Stewart. Well, in the Qin royal residence, if you need anything, just instruct Hong Mai. She's an old hand here, you may leave now. Lady White, realizing the issue wasn't with the young lady, said nothing further, only feeling that the situation was unexpectedly overwhelming. Claire Crawford pretended to wipe away tears before slowly retreating. Hong Mai served tea, offering Claire Crawford a cup of de Hong Pao. Your Highness, this is this year's new tea, please try it. Hong Mai clearly intended to curry favor, but unfortunately, she was too calculating and couldn't be trusted. Who told you I like de Hong Pao?
If you're unsure, ask first, but never make decisions on your own. Claire Crawford refused the tea, and Willow Green advised, Her Highness prefers milk tea.
Hong Mai felt slightly aggrieved and said, Your Highness, you've just married into the Qin royal family, and there are customs you may not know. Here, everything follows the prince's preferences, and you must adapt to his tastes. The Da Hong Pao tea was cold, but since Hong Mai was Lady White's person, no one in the Qin residence dared to challenge her. Very well. Claire Crawford nodded, recognizing Hong Mai's audacity and deciding not to regret it. Leave it there. Claire Crawford said, and Hong Mai assumed she had conceded. She naturally disregarded Claire Crawford, viewing her as merely a secondary wife, especially since she lacked Lady White's favor. Lady White had her own preferred candidate for the Qin princess. Hong Mai believed that Claire Crawford would eventually relinquish her position, so there was no need to win her over. Thus, the Da Hong Pao was left until the afternoon when Eric Stuart returned. Claire Crawford personally handed him the tea Hong Mai had prepared. Hong Mai brewed this herself. I fear it might shorten my life. Would you like to try it? Although Claire Crawford phrased it as a question, her tone left no room for refusal, clearly instructing Eric Stuart to drink it. Chapter 68, handling Hong Mai. Eric Stuart opened the lid and was genuinely astonished. Cold water soak? The tea inside had no color, just a faint tea hue, making it clear that Hong Mai was lazy and negligent with Claire Crawford. Prince Tan, even in the peach blossom pavilion of the Marquis residence, no one dares to delay me like this. Claire Crawford put on a small, aggrieved face. How could Eric Stuart tolerate this? Why didn't you tell me earlier? In Prince Tan's residence, everything is up to you. If you want to deal with someone, do it. I'll back you up, Eric Stuart said, ready to dismiss Hong Mai. But Claire Crawford stopped him. Does the prince really not care? Hong Mai, this girl, is quite pretty. Aren't you reluctant? Claire Crawford also noticed Hong Mai's bright eyes and brows, now seemingly interested in Eric Stuart. She could only cooperate with Eric Stuart as best as she could. As for other matters, Claire Crawford admitted she couldn't provide them. Therefore, if Eric Stuart liked another woman, as long as she was gentle and virtuous, Claire wouldn't be unable to tolerate it. But not Hong Mai. Her intentions weren't pure, she wasn't a good person. Why would I be reluctant? Claire, are you jealous? Eric Stuart's way of addressing her changed daily. For instance, on their wedding night, he called her the Crawford girl. Now it was Claire? That girl likes you anyway. Claire Crawford hesitated but hadn't finished speaking when Eric Stuart seriously said, if she becomes an obstacle between us, I'll personally remove it. Forget it. If they killed Hong Mai over a cup of tea today, rumors would spread throughout Prince Tan's residence. She didn't want to be lectured by Lady White again. I'll reluctantly believe you. If you find someone you like in the future, as long as we can live harmoniously, I can tolerate it, Claire Crawford stammered, not expecting Eric Stuart to get angry. What was that about? He wanted to be with her, yet she seemed to push him away. Eric Stuart almost stormed off in anger, this time causing rumors to spread throughout Prince Tan's residence. They said Eric Stuart was angry with Claire Crawford over Hong Mai, leading Claire Crawford to obediently listen from then on. However, poor Eric Stuart didn't realize that in his anger, he decided to sleep in the study, feeling cold and nearly catching a chill. The next morning, Seven Moon hurriedly reported the rumors in Prince Tan's residence to Eric Stuart. What? Who is she? Eric Stuart had never even looked at Hong Mai, let alone gotten angry with Claire Crawford over her. But now, what were the rumors in Prince Tan's residence? Your Highness, don't be agitated, Seven Moon said, seeing Eric Stuart ready to draw his sword. I'll investigate where the rumors started. It seems it was spread by Willow Green, who serves the princess. Seven Moon discovered that Willow Green had spread the rumor and hesitated before reporting to Eric Stuart. Did Willow Green betray the princess? Eric Stuart was puzzled as to why Willow Green would spread such words. I believe the princess instructed her to do it, Seven Moon suggested, thinking Willow Green wouldn't betray the princess. Thus, the rumor could only have been spread by the princess herself. Eric Stuart rubbed his temples, feeling a headache even without catching a cold. Just as Eric Stuart was troubled, Hong Mai came in with washing supplies. Your Highness, let me assist you with washing up. Hong Mai seemed meticulously dressed, with the scent of osmanthus, which Eric Stuart liked. But Hong Mai didn't know he liked the scent of osmanthus, not on a woman.
Therefore, Eric Stuart now understood Hong Mai's intentions.
Unfortunately, Hong Mai hadn't even touched Eric Stuart when Claire Crawford came in with Willow Green, witnessing the scene. "Oh, so the prince didn't come to bed last night because he had a beauty to accompany him?" Claire Crawford remarked, giving Hong Mai what she thought was a golden opportunity.
Therefore, she decided to take a gamble and immediately knelt down, saying, "My lord, my lady, please don't misunderstand the Duke. It's all my fault, it's my fault for admiring the Duke. I don't seek status, I only wish to be by his side often." Eric Stuart was genuinely surprised. When did he ever have such feelings for Hong Mai? He himself didn't even know. At this moment, Claire Crawford smiled. She slowly approached, lifted Hong Mai's chin, and carefully observed her face.
"Indeed, your appearance is beautiful. If you have no ulterior motives, it might not be unacceptable," Claire Crawford said. However, Eric Stuart was not pleased. What was this? Using him as bait? "If the Duke is willing, I have no objections, but do you think you are worthy? Though Madame White likes you, it's not because she wants you to climb into the Duke's bed. Do you think, now that your intentions have been exposed, you can still stay in the Duke's residence?" Claire Crawford understood Madame White too well. Madame White targeted her because she felt Claire's status was unworthy of Eric Stuart's rank as Duke. Claire was the third daughter of a marquis, and Madame White thought even she wasn't suitable for Eric Stuart, let alone someone like Hong Mai, who was of low status and even less worthy. Hong Mai now felt a bit frightened. Claire Crawford was scheming against her, slowly plotting, indulging her, spreading those rumors so that the entire Duke's residence would believe she was about to become Eric Stuart's woman. Now, in a moment of rashness, she revealed her intentions. Claire Crawford smiled calmly, watching Hong Mai realize her mistake, but it was too late. "Willow Green, send someone to Lady White, saying that by the side of the princess, there's no room for someone with too many schemes. By the prince's side, being a little foolish is fine, but having too many schemes will bring disaster to the prince's residence." After speaking, Hong Mai was taken away. Eric Stuart looked at Claire Crawford, his small face twisted in anger. "Aren't you going to have breakfast?" Claire Crawford asked. Eric Stuart looked at Claire Crawford, wondering why she didn't try to placate him. He was angry. "I'm not eating." Eric Stuart turned his face away, deliberately coughing loudly, so much so that Seven Moon outside could hear. "All right then, I personally made rose pastries and cooked soup. If you won't drink it, I'll go pour it out," Claire Crawford said and began to leave. Seeing Claire Crawford actually leave, Eric Stuart hurried after her. "Who said I'm not eating? Of course, I have to eat." Eric Stuart's anger dissipated overnight. The entire prince's residence gossiped about Claire Crawford's cleverness in quietly appeasing Eric Stuart. They said Eric Stuart was angry, but just one breakfast made him happy again. The two ate joyfully, and Claire Crawford even picked peach blossoms from the tree, stepping on Eric Stuart's shoulders. Lady White was furious, thinking such behavior was unacceptable and not befitting a noble lady. "This is too indulgent. If Eric continues like this, he will be ruined," Lady White fumed. Linda Stevenson, who was serving her, smiled and said, "Perhaps the prince adores the princess too much." Lady White became even angrier. "Adoration? As a woman, as a princess, one must always be vigilant. What time is it now? Yet she remains so foolish. How can she be worthy of being a princess?" Linda Stevenson said nothing but supported Lady White as they left. Meanwhile, Claire Crawford picked quite a few peach blossoms, feeling a chill behind her, but when she turned around, no one was there. "I must say, why is your mouth so greedy? Last time you drank my peach blossom wine, and now you're begging me to make it again," Claire Crawford said, having carefully selected the blossoms. Although she claimed to be forced, she seemed quite happy picking them. Eric Stuart lifted Claire Crawford, who was barefoot, and said, "I am greedy for your peach blossom wine and for you." He also desired her body, but that was something he couldn't say yet, it would have to wait until their hearts were in sync. Claire Crawford was carried into the room and placed beside the basket, as Willow Green then took it away.
Chapter 69, returning to her family home 3 days after the wedding, Claire Crawford returned to her family home. The elderly matriarch of the White family prepared her belongings rather carelessly, having never liked Claire Crawford, and now even less inclined to show any warmth. However, she was unaware that Eric Stuart had already prepared a thoughtful dowry gift in advance. When Eric Stuart and Claire Crawford arrived at the residence, Prince Lance and Emily Crawford had just returned as well. The difference between these two couples was significant. Although Vincent showed some favoritism towards Prince Lance himself lacked the necessary capabilities. The gifts Eric Stuart sent were perfectly suited to Vincent's tastes, clearly indicating that Eric Stuart and Claire Crawford were more favored. "Father, I haven't seen you for 3 days, did you miss me?" Claire Crawford playfully asked, and how could Vincent resist? Knowing that Claire Crawford was living well at the Duke's mansion and had Eric Stuart's genuine affection, Vincent believed that Eric Stuart was certainly within his control. The difference compared to Emily Crawford was stark. Prince Lance had a poor attitude, and his return this time was merely perfunctory. "You're still the most well-behaved, come here, I've saved some egg rolls for you, all your favorites." Vincent held Claire Crawford's hand, highlighting the stark contrast with Emily Crawford. Prince Lance looked displeased, his face expressionless. He had originally promised to be with Claire Crawford but ended up with Emily Crawford. Although Emily Crawford was also beautiful, he still longed for Claire Crawford. Not having her was perhaps for the best. "Elder sister is pregnant, have some too," Claire Crawford said with a smile, serving Emily Crawford a piece. In truth, she was contemplating when the child in Emily Crawford's womb would be lost. Yes, a miscarriage. Without a pregnancy, how could there be a child? Claire Crawford's return this time was intentional, to see how Emily Crawford would walk into her own trap. After all, now that Prince Lance was with Emily Crawford, he would surely start applying pressure on Eric Stuart, perhaps because Prince Lance felt that Eric Stuart had been standing out a bit too much lately. Additionally, Claire Crawford was now the Princess of Onping, with military merits to her name. If not suppressed, she might become difficult to handle. This return was initially intended for consultation with Vincent, but seeing Claire Crawford and Vincent so close, Prince Lance didn't know what to say. "Thank you, third sister." Emily Crawford was currently focused on dealing with the child in her womb. Seeing Claire Crawford gave her an idea. For instance, blaming her would be quite advantageous, wouldn't it? If she could help Prince Lance ruin Claire Crawford's reputation, her relationship with Prince Lance might not be so bleak. Currently, Prince Lance was only treating her slightly better because of the child in her womb, but since the child was a ruse, Emily Crawford knew she had to deal with it to change Prince Lance's perception of her, so she could live better in the future. Right now, Prince Lance wouldn't even touch her, which made Emily Crawford very anxious. Claire Crawford was currently radiant, in contrast to the First Lady and Vincent Crawford, who seemed less pleased. Vincent Crawford wasn't exactly jealous of Claire Crawford and Emily Crawford's positions as princesses, but he did feel somewhat unhappy. Jade Stone basically ignored her and didn't pay attention to her, causing Vincent Crawford to feel uneasy these past few days. She wanted to reconnect with Jade Stone, but, after sneaking out several times only to miss him, she became flustered, something Jade Stone had never done before. Why? She didn't feel she had done anything wrong, yet why was Jade Stone ignoring her? She was under pressure from Vincent and her mother, had given up the position of Prince Lance's consort, so why was even Jade Stone ignoring her? What are you daydreaming about, second sister? Now that both big sister and I are married, father will surely find a suitable match for you, Claire Crawford said, leaving Vincent Crawford stunned. Vincent Crawford said nothing, but the First Lady disapproved, thinking Claire Crawford was being smug and insincere. Wasn't she just marrying Eric Stuart? He was merely an unloved prince, so what was there to boast about? Claire, don't worry about your second sister's affairs. It seems your marriage is going well. Prince Tan treats you better than Emily, the First Lady remarked, leaving Emily Crawford with an extremely unpleasant expression. Wasn't this implying that she was living a worse life than Claire Crawford? Since marrying, Prince Lance had been cold to her, spending nights in the concubines' rooms, and now all that remained between them was the child in her womb.
But if she couldn't even keep this child, then her relationship with Prince Lance would truly be over. Emily Crawford, though upset, held back. The First Lady was trying to sow discord, but for now, she needed to win Prince Lance's favor to secure her position. Otherwise, her status as Prince Lance's consort would soon be lost. Prince Lance visited the residence today and spent the entire time staring at Claire Crawford. Although Emily Crawford felt uneasy, she dared not say anything.
Willow Green, send someone to Lady White, saying that by the side of the princess, there's no room for someone with too many schemes. By the prince's side, being a little foolish is fine, but having too many schemes will bring disaster to the prince's residence.
After speaking, Hong Mai was taken away.
Eric Stewart looked at Claire Crawford, his small face twisted in anger.
Aren't you going to have breakfast? Claire Crawford asked. Eric Stewart looked at Claire Crawford, wondering why she didn't try to placate him. He was angry. I'm not eating.
Eric Stewart turned his face away, deliberately coughing loudly, so much so that Seven Moon outside could hear.
All right then, I personally made rose pastries and cooked soup. If you won't drink it, I'll go pour it out, Claire Crawford said and began to leave.
Seeing Claire Crawford actually leave, Eric Stewart hurried after her.
Who said I'm not eating? Of course, I have to eat. Eric Stewart's anger dissipated overnight. The entire prince's residence gossiped about Claire Crawford's cleverness in quietly appeasing Eric Stewart.
They said Eric Stewart was angry, but just one breakfast made him happy again. The two ate joyfully, and Claire Crawford even picked peach blossoms from the tree, stepping on Eric Stewart's shoulders. Lady White was furious, thinking such behavior was unacceptable and not befitting a noble lady. This is too indulgent. If Eric continues like this, he will be ruined, Lady White fumed. Linda Stevenson, who was serving her, smiled and said, perhaps the prince adores the princess too much.
Lady White became even angrier. Adoration?
As a woman, as a princess, one must always be vigilant.
What time is it now?
Yet she remains so foolish.
How can she be worthy of being a princess? Linda Stevenson said nothing but supported Lady White as they left.
Meanwhile, Claire Crawford picked quite a few peach blossoms, feeling a chill behind her, but when she turned around, no one was there.
I must say, why is your mouth so greedy? Last time you drank my peach blossom wine, and now you're begging me to make it again, Claire Crawford said, having carefully selected the blossoms. Although she claimed to be forced, she seemed quite happy picking them. Eric Stewart lifted Claire Crawford, who was barefoot, and said, I am greedy for your peach blossom wine and for you. He also desired her body, but that was something he couldn't say yet, it would have to wait until their hearts were in sync. Claire Crawford was carried into the room and placed beside the basket, as Willow Green then took it away. Chapter 69, returning to her family home 3 days after the wedding, Claire Crawford returned to her family home. The elderly matriarch of the White family prepared her belongings rather carelessly, having never liked Claire Crawford, and now even less inclined to show any warmth. However, she was unaware that Eric Stewart had already prepared a thoughtful dowry gift in advance. When Eric Stewart and Claire Crawford arrived at the residence, Prince Lance and Emily Crawford had just returned as well. The difference between these two couples was significant. Although Vincent showed some favoritism towards Prince Lance himself lacked the necessary capabilities. The gifts Eric Stewart sent were perfectly suited to Vincent's tastes, clearly indicating that Eric Stewart and Claire Crawford were more favored. Father, I haven't seen you for 3 days, did you miss me? Claire Crawford playfully asked, and how could Vincent resist? Knowing that Claire Crawford was living well at the Duke's mansion and had Eric Stewart's genuine affection, Vincent believed that Eric Stewart was certainly within his control. The difference compared to Emily Crawford was stark. Prince Lance had a poor attitude, and his return this time was merely perfunctory. You're still the most well-behaved, come here, I've saved some egg rolls for you, all your favorites. Vincent held Claire Crawford's hand, highlighting the stark contrast with Emily Crawford. Prince Lance looked displeased, his face expressionless. He had originally promised to be with Claire Crawford but ended up with Emily Crawford. Although Emily Crawford was also beautiful, he still longed for Claire Crawford. Not having her was perhaps for the best.
Elder sister is pregnant, have some too, Claire Crawford said with a smile, serving Emily Crawford a piece. In truth, she was contemplating when the child in Emily Crawford's womb would be lost.
Yes, a miscarriage. Without a pregnancy, how could there be a child?
Claire Crawford's return this time was intentional, to see how Emily Crawford would walk into her own trap. After all, now that Prince Lance was with Emily Crawford, he would surely start applying pressure on Eric Stuart, perhaps because Prince Lance felt that Eric Stuart had been standing out a bit too much lately. Additionally, Claire Crawford was now the Princess of Onping, with military merits to her name. If not suppressed, she might become difficult to handle. This return was initially intended for consultation with Vincent, but seeing Claire Crawford and Vincent so close, Prince Lance didn't know what to say. Thank you, third sister. Emily Crawford was currently focused on dealing with the child in her womb.
Seeing Claire Crawford gave her an idea. For instance, blaming her would be quite advantageous, wouldn't it? If she could help Prince Lance ruin Claire Crawford's reputation, her relationship with Prince Lance might not be so bleak. Currently, Prince Lance was only treating her slightly better because of the child in her womb, but since the child was a ruse, Emily Crawford knew she had to deal with it to change Prince Lance's perception of her, so she could live better in the future. Right now, Prince Lance wouldn't even touch her, which made Emily Crawford very anxious. Claire Crawford was currently radiant, in contrast to the First Lady and Vincent Crawford, who seemed displeased. Vincent Crawford wasn't exactly jealous of Claire Crawford and Emily Crawford's positions as princesses, but he felt somewhat unhappy. Jade Stone basically ignored her and paid no attention to her, making Vincent Crawford feel uneasy these past few days. She wanted to start over with Jade Stone, but after sneaking out several times without meeting him, she became alarmed. This was something Jade Stone had never done before. Why? She didn't feel she had done anything wrong, so why was Jade Stone ignoring her?
She was under pressure from Vincent and her mother, and she had given up her position as Prince Lance's consort, so why was Jade Stone also ignoring her?
What are you daydreaming about, second sister?
Now that both I and our eldest sister are married, Father will surely find someone suitable for you, Claire Crawford said, leaving Vincent Crawford stunned. Vincent Crawford said nothing, but the First Lady disagreed, believing Claire Crawford was being smug and had no good intentions.
Wasn't she just married to Eric Stuart? He was just a prince without favor, so what was there to boast about?
Claire, don't worry about your second sister's matters. It seems your marriage is quite good, and Prince Tan treats you well, better than Emily, the First Lady said, making Emily Crawford's face turn sour.
Wasn't this implying that her life was worse than Claire Crawford's?
After marriage, Prince Lance treated her coldly, spending nights in the concubine's room.
Now, the only thing left between her and Prince Lance was the child in her womb.
But now, if she couldn't even keep this child, her relationship with Prince Lance would truly end.
Though Emily Crawford's expression was unpleasant, she held back. Even though the First Lady was causing division, she had to win over Prince Lance for now. Only by gaining Prince Lance's approval could she secure her position in the future.
Otherwise, her status as Prince Lance's consort would eventually be lost. Today, when Prince Lance visited the mansion, he spent the entire time staring at Claire Crawford.
Although Emily Crawford felt uncomfortable, she didn't dare to say anything.
Eldest sister is pregnant now, with Prince Lance's love, she must be happy, Claire Crawford said with a faint smile, glancing at Prince Lance. Prince Lance snapped out of it, looked at Emily Crawford awkwardly, and replied, yes, Emily is pregnant now, and of course, I cherish her deeply.
Claire Crawford smiled faintly, and Eric Stuart next to her knew it was all a show. But the urgent matter was to divert Prince Lance's attention away from Claire Crawford.
After all, no one would be happy if a man's eyes were always on their wife. Prince Lance, you truly cherish your new sister-in-law, Eric Stuart said with a smile, though Emily Crawford's expression remained extremely unpleasant. Indeed, everyone could see that Prince Lance was forced to marry Emily Crawford, and continuously mentioning the child only provoked Prince Lance. The wedding feast was not enjoyable, and Vincent did not stand up for Prince Lance. In truth, it was because Prince Lance didn't know how to behave. If he were more sensible, Vincent might have favored him more.
Unfortunately, Prince Lance was currently angry with Vincent. However, Prince Lance didn't realize that under Claire Crawford's guidance, Eric Stuart had a very good, even subtle, relationship with Vincent.
After the meal, an uninvited guest arrived at the mansion. Though called uninvited, it was just that Vincent and the First Lady did not welcome this person. "Father, today my two sisters are having their wedding feast, and as their brother, I naturally have to come join the celebration," Jade Stone said with a smile as he walked in, showing no shame at all. Chapter 70, Emily Crawford's uneasy kindness. Clearly, Lord Crawford was not pleased upon meeting Jade Stone. His expression slightly changed.
Unfortunately, Jade Stone acted as if she didn't notice. However, when Jade Stone met Eric Stuart, their eyes met briefly, but it was enough to catch Claire Crawford's attention. "Did you send someone?" Claire Crawford whispered to Eric Stuart, making it look like they were sharing a secret. Eric Stuart, with a doting expression, replied ambiguously, "You like watching dramas, don't you? Anyway, the manor is already in chaos today, why not add a little more drama?" Claire Crawford felt that Eric Stuart had a little secret, and he wasn't sharing it with her. Oh well. Eric Stuart had never felt so insignificant. Seeing Claire Crawford ignore him, he clung to her like a puppy seeking attention. Lord Crawford is keeping something from the Stone family, and today, Jade Stone is here to sever ties with him. Eric Stuart had informed Jade Stone before she returned to her family. Currently, the relationship between Jade Stone and the manor was only nominal, needing just a spark to ignite. If Jade Stone caused trouble today, it certainly wouldn't end well. The most important thing was for Prince Lance to see a glimmer of hope. If Jade Stone turned against Lord Crawford, Prince Lance would surely hope for her to join his side, possibly even offering secret support. This would further strain the relationship between Lord Crawford and Prince Lance. Eric Stuart intended to muddy the waters, hoping to see Lord Crawford without any allies, allowing him to reap the benefits effortlessly. "Jade Stone, this is a family gathering, why are you here?" The matron was displeased with Jade Stone's visit, feeling a bit irked. At this moment, she didn't know what to say. Why did Jade Stone come? Most importantly, Vincent Crawford stood up with a surprised expression, making the matron feel something was amiss. Her daughter was too stubborn. If she continued associating with Jade Stone, it would surely anger Lord Crawford. Then, it would be difficult to get Lord Crawford to care about Vincent Crawford's marriage. The matron was worried, hesitating on how to make Jade Stone leave. But Jade Stone seemed indifferent. Welcomed or not, it didn't matter. The urgent matter now was to reclaim the Stone family's belongings, the ancestral jade pendant, which was in Lord Crawford's possession. Jade Stone intended to create a scene in front of Prince Lance and King Tan, forcing Lord Crawford to return the pendant. With so many witnesses, including royalty, Lord Crawford couldn't deny it. "Mother, what do you mean? Jade has lived in the manor for many years. Although you and father are not her biological parents, she has always been grateful. Today, she just wants to visit her sisters for the first time since returning to her family," Jade Stone said convincingly, though it wasn't the truth. Lord Crawford looked at Jade Stone, worried she might continue causing trouble. He didn't want to revisit past events. If Jade Stone brought up the past here, it would be unpleasant. "Jade Stone, what exactly do you want?" Lord Crawford, sitting on his high chair, finally spoke, his patience wearing thin. Jade Stone smiled and said, "Father, years ago you kept some things for me because I was young. Now that I have grown up and found someone I love, about to start my own family, shouldn't you return my belongings?" After she spoke, Lord Crawford understood her purpose. She came to reclaim her family's jade pendant. Over the years, Lord Crawford had been studying Jade Stone's pendant without discovering anything. Now that Jade Stone was demanding it back, he had no reason to keep it. "All right then, back when you were young, I kept this for you. Now that you've asked for it, it's time to return the jade pendant to you." With that, Lord Crawford entered the room, retrieved the jade pendant, and handed it back to Jade Stone. Of course, Lord Crawford's expression was not pleasant, as he seemed to view Jade Stone as an enemy. Jade Stone accepted the pendant with a smile, and Lord Crawford remarked, "Jade Stone, now that you've asked for the pendant, you say you're about to settle down. Even crows have a duty to repay, but I don't expect anything from you. Take care of yourself."
Jade Stone thanked Lord Crawford, though he had never cared much, and now cared even less. As Jade Stone was about to leave, Vincent Crawford couldn't help but call out, "Brother Jade." This remark angered Lord Crawford, and the lady of the house immediately pulled Vincent back, scolding, "What brother? From now on, he's a gentleman, not your brother anymore." Jade Stone smiled, holding the pendant, and said to Vincent Crawford, "There was a time I didn't intend to reclaim this pendant, but now that I have, it no longer belongs to the Vincent household. Lord, lady, take care." Naturally, Lord Crawford felt Jade Stone was ungrateful, having raised him for years, only to be treated so heartlessly.
Claire Crawford, having seen enough drama, returned to her plum blossom pavilion.
She intended to see more, but unexpectedly overheard a troubling conversation behind the rock garden.
Emily Crawford, true to her delicate name, held Prince Lance's arm and softly asked, "Your Highness, do you really dislike Emily? If you can forgive Emily, she will do anything for you."
The phrase "do anything" was intriguing.
"Emily, you know what kind of person I am. I think only of the future. You are already Prince Lance's consort, you must be more magnanimous, understand?" Although Prince Lance had married Emily Crawford, who was indeed beautiful, she couldn't compare to Claire Crawford. Therefore, Prince Lance thought, if Emily could help him win the beauty over, it wouldn't be a bad thing. "I understand, Your Highness," Emily replied, though she was unwilling in her heart.
For her future, she had to endure for now. However, she had other plans in mind. She touched her belly, determined to find someone to take the fall, and she wouldn't hold back. So, Emily went to the Plum Blossom Pavilion. She didn't know that Claire had overheard everything behind the scenes, and her visit was certainly not for anything good.
"Why has my elder sister come to visit me at our family home?"
Claire Crawford asked with a smile while busying herself in her pavilion, preparing to take some things back. Meeting Emily Crawford was never pleasant, so Claire remained cautious, suspecting Emily's visit was not for a good reason. Chapter 71, Emily Crawford's miscarriage. Sister-in-law, although our relationship hasn't been great in the past, you know that my relationship with second sister-in-law is even worse.
Honestly, in this marquisate, you're the only one I get along with," Emily Crawford said, grasping Claire Crawford's hand as if she wanted to chat intimately. Unfortunately, Claire Crawford wasn't easily fooled.
She took the opportunity to check Emily's pulse, noting that the medicine Margaret Seymour had given Emily was almost entirely flushed out.
"Elder sister, just say what you need to say directly.
There's no need to beat around the bush with me." Claire stepped back a few steps, while Willow Green beside her kept a close eye on Emily Crawford. Emily felt a bit troubled by the two's vigilance.
"Willow Green, I have something to discuss with sister-in-law. Why don't you know how to read the situation?"
Emily wanted Willow Green to leave, but she refused. "Princess Lance, the prince instructed me to stay by your side and not leave even half a step." Willow Green bluntly expressed her distrust in Emily, causing Claire to chuckle.
Willow Green's ability to leave Emily speechless was a first.
"Elder sister, as you can see, my husband keeps a tight watch on me. I can't be as carefree as you." Claire implied her desire to distance herself from Emily, wanting no further entanglements.
Claire understood Emily's intentions but couldn't resist teasing her.
It was evident to everyone that Prince Lance didn't care much for Emily, and his return was merely out of respect for Vincent. Emily's face grew even more displeased at this realization.
Eric Stewart treated Claire Crawford exceptionally well.
Be it the dowry or anything else, he always showed her great kindness, which was obvious to anyone with eyes. Claire's words were clearly meant to poke at Emily's sore spot. "Elder sister, come here, I have something to tell you." Claire saw Eric Stewart approaching, knowing that the matter on his side was settled and he wanted to take her home. Having had her fun, Claire moved closer to Emily, placing her hand on her belly.
"Elder sister, I know all about your schemes and those of your little mother.
No matter who you want to blame for this, child, don't pin your hopes on me, or I'll make you regret it," Claire warned, her eyes narrowing at Emily's astonished face, which showed a complete lack of cunning.
"It seems you two have finished talking," Eric Stewart said with a smile, holding 2 bottles of fine wine and shaking them in front of Claire. "Father-in-law gave us 2 bottles of green plum wine. I thought you might like it, so I brought them for you." The way Eric and Claire interacted was like an ordinary married couple.
Emily could see clearly the affection in Eric's eyes, making her feel like an outsider.
Jealousy and envy overwhelmed her. Why could Claire Crawford have such a good man, while she had to live a tragic life? Prince Lance never truly loved her.
From the moment she shared a bed with him until the end, she realized that everything Prince Lance said to her was a lie. Words spoken by men in bed cannot be trusted.
But her pregnancy couldn't wait any longer. If things continued like this, she would be exposed. Once exposed, her position as Prince Lance's consort would be lost. Therefore, no matter what, this time when Emily Crawford returned, she had to find someone else to take the fall. Emily Crawford would not dare to offend Claire Crawford again, especially after being frightened by her words. Thus, she could only find another scapegoat. Vincent Crawford was crying bitterly, not for any other reason than being harshly rejected by Jade Stone, who wished her a future in a grand household. Vincent couldn't stop crying.
Emily Crawford pretended to approach her. "Why are you crying, dear sister? This is the Marquis residence. If you cry so sorrowfully, your elder sister will be heartbroken." Emily's words were somewhat nauseating, as Vincent knew they never had a cordial conversation.
They were, after all, enemies. Emily's consolation was likely a scheme. "Emily Crawford, what do you mean? What are you trying to say?" Vincent wiped her tears, seeing Emily approach without fear. Even if she was now Prince Lance's consort or became a concubine in the palace, she wasn't afraid of Emily at all. She stood up, glaring at Emily, even ready to fight. Emily, aware of Vincent's hostility, moved closer, grabbing her arm, saying, "Dear sister, I'm just worried about you. Seeing you cry so sadly, I wanted to comfort you a bit." Vincent couldn't trust Emily and immediately shook her hand off. At that moment, as Vincent pushed Emily's hand away, Prince Lance, Eric Stewart, and Claire Crawford appeared. They were initially bidding farewell to Vincent, and Emily had timed their exit perfectly. Suddenly, Emily fell to the ground, blood flowing from her leg. "Dear sister, I was only worried about you. Why did you treat me like this? I just saw you crying and wanted to comfort you. Why did you push me? My child, my child." Emily kept mentioning her child. Despite Prince Lance's dislike for Emily's scheming, she was carrying his child. But now, Emily had been pushed to the ground by Vincent and was bleeding. Vincent rushed out, and the matron was shocked. What had happened? Why was Emily pushed to the ground? Why was she bleeding? Vincent immediately called for the royal physician, and Emily was carried into an inner room by Prince Lance to await the physician's arrival. Emily kept mentioning her child. Despite Prince Lance's dislike for Emily's scheming, she was carrying his child. But now, Emily had been pushed to the ground by Vincent and was bleeding. Vincent rushed out, and the matron was shocked. What had happened? Why was Emily pushed to the ground? Why was she bleeding? Vincent immediately called for the royal physician, and Emily was carried into an inner room by Prince Lance to await the physician's arrival. Claire Crawford watched the royal physician examining while talking to Eric Stewart. "What do you think about this?" Eric Stewart looked at Claire Crawford and asked. Claire Crawford whispered to Eric Stewart, "The body is fine, but the baby cannot be saved." As soon as Claire finished speaking, the royal physician confirmed the same, the baby indeed could not be saved. Now, it was Emily Crawford's turn to wake up and cause a scene, targeting Vincent Crawford with relentless chaos. Claire Crawford and Eric Stewart truly witnessed a grand drama, watching until they were hungry and even ate a plate of pastries. The taste isn't as good as yours, but it fills the stomach for now. Claire Crawford glanced at Eric Stewart and shook her head helplessly. Chapter 72, Punished to copy scriptures. Prince Lance was currently filled with anger, as Vincent Crawford caused Emily Crawford to miscarry. Although Prince Lance didn't care much about Emily's child, he couldn't just let someone be bullied like that, could he? Just as he was about to lose his temper, he saw Claire Crawford suddenly smile. Someone miscarried. Emily Crawford was crying pitifully, yet Claire Crawford was smiling. Prince Lance was a bit annoyed, but since it was Claire Crawford, he asked, "Why is the princess consort smiling?" "Your Highness, Prince Lance, the elder and second sister have always had a good relationship. Could there be some misunderstanding?" Claire Crawford said, then looked towards Emily Crawford.
It was known that when Claire Crawford spoke like this, Emily Crawford dared not contradict her. It wasn't that Emily was timid, but she couldn't bear another physician checking her pulse. If Claire Crawford revealed everything, Emily wouldn't be able to hide the truth. Therefore, she felt aggrieved and called out, "Your Highness." Claire Crawford pretended to look at Emily Crawford, then said, "Your Highness, the elder sister is crying sorrowfully. Surely she didn't mean to push me. I beg you not to blame her."
Vincent was surprised to hear this, looking at Claire Crawford. Since when did Emily Crawford become so obedient? In his impression, things shouldn't be like this.
Emily Crawford was someone who didn't listen to anyone, a person with her own ideas, capable of deceiving him along with Margaret Seymour to marry Prince Lance.
How could she listen to Claire Crawford?
"Your Highness, Prince Lance, the elder and second sister have always had a good relationship."
Was it really the elder sister who pushed the second sister, leading to the miscarriage, or was it because the second sister was weak, crying day after getting married, with pent-up emotions, leading to today's miscarriage? Prince Lance's face was hard to maintain, angrily saying, "What do you mean?" Claire Crawford just smiled and said no more.
Prince Lance knew very well that he hadn't treated Emily Crawford well since the marriage, so he worried that Emily had pent-up emotions, but ultimately it was his poor treatment of her that led to the miscarriage. "All right, Vincent, this matter was indeed because your legitimate daughter pushed my consort, causing her
miscarriage.
I can refrain from telling the Emperor, but you should educate your daughter properly." After saying this, Prince Lance ordered someone to take Emily Crawford away and left in anger. Prince Lance was simply spoiled by everyone, so he didn't realize that today's outburst had caused Vincent to harbor resentment towards him.
After Prince Lance left, Claire Crawford secretly met with Vincent. "Tell me, what exactly happened?" Vincent naturally knew that Emily Crawford wasn't someone who would obediently follow orders, so why was she doing so now? Claire Crawford stayed behind, likely to explain to him.
"Father, I accidentally discovered that there's an issue with the child in my eldest sister's womb. This morning, she approached me. I thought she wanted sisterly chat, but she intended to frame me, accusing me of causing her miscarriage. I warned my eldest sister, planning to discuss a strategy with you after everyone left. Unexpectedly, she was impatient and framed our second sister instead," Claire Crawford explained, leaving Vincent furious.
He knew Margaret Seymour and Emily Crawford were bold and independent but didn't expect their audacity to be this great. "Father, I was reckless today and offended Prince Lance.
Please forgive me, but if I hadn't spoken up, our second sister would have been implicated, and Prince Lance might use her to threaten you."
Claire Crawford played the good person, and Vincent was well aware.
Now, Vincent felt his daughter was very much like him. If he could completely control Eric Stuart, then supporting the useless Prince Tan to the throne would still keep him in power.
"What you did was righteous, how could I blame you?"
"Don't worry about Prince Lance, I see that Prince Tan treats you well, which gives me peace of mind."
Claire Crawford smiled faintly, understanding that Vincent's mention of Eric Stuart indicated his dissatisfaction with Prince Lance.
Today's events successfully revealed Prince Lance's true nature, and Vincent likely wouldn't want to support him alone. Thus, her goal was achieved. As long as she could reach her objectives, why not do whatever it takes? When they left, Vincent personally saw them off and praised Eric Stuart. Claire Crawford smiled calmly, and once in the carriage, Eric Stuart expressed his gratitude, saying, "Thank you, Lady Claire, for your help." Claire Crawford looked at Eric Stuart. Everything she did was for him, and he understood this.
Seeing Claire Crawford silent, Eric Stuart continued, "Wife? Lady? Spouse?" Claire Crawford couldn't help but laugh.
This man, once so indifferent and cold, had now become so thick-skinned, it was truly unexpected. Upon returning home, Eric Stuart was summoned by Seven Moon for military matters, specifically related to the Imperial Guards, and Claire Crawford didn't inquire further. She intended to rest a bit, but unexpectedly, Lady White arrived to reprimand her.
"The prince isn't back yet, so how can you rest? What kind of wife are you?"
Lady White appeared like a ghost before Claire Crawford. At that moment, Claire Crawford was lazily lying on a chaise longue, reaching for a snack with her eyes closed. Caught by Lady White, she quickly stood up. Though not afraid of her, she respected her as Eric Stuart's aunt.
"Aunt?" Claire Crawford immediately rose, knowing she couldn't afford to offend her. Look at yourself, do you have the demeanor of a princess? So lazy.
Qing knew, bring the princess the royal rules and have her copy them 300 times.
If she doesn't remember, continue copying. Oh my. Claire Crawford felt like cursing. Why was she being treated like this? She worked hard to make Vincent interested in Eric Stuart, but did this old woman know? Yes, Aunt, I understand.
Claire Crawford cursed 1,000 times in her heart but dared not offend the old lady outwardly. Otherwise, who knows how much more trouble she would cause. After Lady White left, Claire Crawford looked at the rules in Willow Green's hand, feeling utterly overwhelmed. Miss, it was better when we were at the Marquis's residence, at least you didn't have to copy these things, Willow Green said angrily, seeing her mistress being bullied. How could they treat her like this? Chapter 73, No Dogs in the Stuarts Allowed. Claire Crawford was also very angry. But what could she do? Lady White was not someone easy to provoke, and she couldn't argue with an elder. So, Claire eagerly went to copy scriptures, but after just 2 or 3 pages, she gave up. Willow Green, get me some food. This copying task is not for humans. I want braised grouper and steamed shrimp. Go see when the prince will return, Claire Crawford said. Willow Green immediately sent someone to the front courtyard to check, then headed to the kitchen. Unexpectedly, when Willow Green brought a fragrant meal to Claire Crawford's my garden, she was stopped by Daisy. I'm sorry, but Lady White has instructed that if the princess hasn't finished copying the women's rules 300 times, she can't eat or rest. Daisy, sent by Lady White, left Willow Green in an awkward position, holding the tray of food. Claire Crawford inside also heard and was truly annoyed. What's going on? Is Lady White deliberately trying to torment her? Claire Crawford picked up her pen, opened the door, and said, Willow Green, if it's Lady White's order, then Daisy should take the food away. Claire Crawford's expression was not good, but she remained polite not to Daisy, but to Lady White. Daisy bowed and said, Princess, the prince respects Lady White greatly. Please complete the 300 copies, even if the prince returns, the result will be the same. Claire Crawford originally didn't want to cause trouble, but seeing Daisy's demeanor now, she couldn't bear the anger. This person was really something, quite capable indeed. If she didn't get angry, did they really think she was a sick cat? Daisy, although you are close to my aunt, you must understand that this is the Qin estate, and I am the rightful Qin Duchess, while you are ultimately an outsider, understand? Trying to assert authority in front of her was not something Daisy could do. So, the urgent matter was to make one thing clear, though she gave way to Dowager White, she was not to be trifled with. Daisy said nothing more and left, while the brush in Claire Crawford's hand became even more loathsome. Miss. Willow Green dared not speak, seeing Claire Crawford's unpleasant expression, unsure how to console her. Go and see Eric Stuart, tell him to sleep in the study tonight, and not to come to my room. Willow Green was stunned. What did this have to do with the Qin Duke? Wasn't it Dowager White causing trouble? However, Willow Green dared not question and quickly followed Claire Crawford's orders to find Eric Stuart. Seeing Eric Stuart had just returned, she hurriedly approached him, Your Grace. Eric Stuart, of course, had no idea what had happened, and was quite cheerful upon seeing Willow Green. What is it? Does your lady miss me? Eric Stuart held a freshly made pine nut candy from Siu Fuang tray, specially bought to please Claire Crawford. Well, Your Grace, it's just that. Willow Green quickly followed him and stopped Eric Stuart as he headed straight to my garden. Willow Green, what exactly do you want to say? Eric Stuart still didn't understand what was happening, so he listened as Willow Green explained, Your Grace, my lady said for you to sleep in the study tonight. After speaking, Willow Green immediately bowed her head, not daring to look up. Eric Stuart rubbed his forehead. Another commotion? What happened? Tell me, what happened while I was away? Eric Stuart asked, and Willow Green quickly replied, Your Grace, Dowager punished my lady by making her copy the women's rules 300 times, and she can't eat until she's done. Eric Stuart nodded, understanding why he had to sleep in the study tonight. What was his aunt up to? He had brought some snacks today, intending to make amends, but now it seemed wasted. I understand, Eric Stuart sighed deeply.
What a situation. So, he hurried to my garden. Claire Crawford was serious. She said Eric Stewart couldn't enter, and she meant it.
The most obvious sign was the wooden board hanging on Claire Crawford's door at my garden. It read clearly, "No dogs or Stewarts allowed."
He felt wronged. What did this have to do with him? This was all his aunt's doing, unrelated to him.
Willow Green was truly in a difficult position. She didn't have the courage to stop Eric Stewart from entering, but she also couldn't let him in.
So, trembling, she asked, "Your Grace, do you want to go in?"
Eric Stewart saw through Willow Green's thoughts and smiled, saying, "Don't worry, I'll just go in and smooth things over.
We are husband and wife, we argue at the head of the bed and make up at the foot."
Willow Green thought Eric Stewart's words made sense. At this moment, Eric Stewart stepped aside and entered with a box of snacks.
Claire Crawford lay on the bed, supposedly resting. She hadn't eaten dinner yet, claiming she needed to practice in the evening. How could she rest so early? She was simply angry. How could the Qin mansion not provide food?
Previously, she thought helping Eric Stewart would grant her more freedom in the Qin mansion. Now, she found herself restricted, constantly feeling the watchful eyes of the old matriarch upon her, making it impossible to evade her gaze. She devised various ways to annoy and trouble her.
"Are you angry?" Eric Stewart asked, trying to appease her by offering the snacks, circling around Claire Crawford. Suddenly, Claire opened her eyes, glaring at Eric Stewart, and angrily said, "Didn't you see the sign outside?
No dogs and no Stewarts allowed."
Can't you read?" His thick skin didn't bother Eric Stewart at all. He calmly sat beside Claire with the snacks, saying, "Your favorite shrimp dumplings, don't you want a bite? There's also siumai and crispy fried meat." Claire frowned at Eric, angrily saying, "I'm not eating." But as soon as she said that, her stomach growled loudly, creating an awkward moment. Eventually, Claire didn't hold back, taking the food box from Eric and eating the snacks with satisfaction. Eric watched her and smiled, feeling immensely satisfied seeing her eat. After finishing her meal, Claire prepared to rest, thinking that being full would make her sleepy. "Don't think you can sleep in this bed, you're not welcome here," Claire said after eating, turning her back on Eric. Eating didn't mean she had reconciled with him, nor did she want to. Chapter 74, Rescuing Jade Stone. Eric Stewart wasn't angry, he just watched Claire. Honestly, wasn't her anger due to Madame White's fuss? Copying scriptures? Copying feminine virtues? It had to be done, but Claire didn't necessarily have to do it herself. Eric stayed up all night, and when Claire woke up the next morning, she found him presenting her with the copied texts. "How about having some small wontons this morning?" Eric asked with a grin. Claire glanced at him and then at the copied feminine virtues he stayed up all night to complete, reluctantly nodding. Willow Green smiled, squinting her eyes, acknowledging her lady's cleverness. The prince truly spoiled her. Willow Green sent the feminine virtues to Madame White's courtyard. Despite Eric staying up all night, he still needed to go to the camp. Although Claire was still angry, she didn't want to stay at the mansion. If she stayed, who knew what more trouble awaited her? "I'll go with you," Eric said, smiling, understanding Claire's thoughts. His aunt was truly overbearing. If she continued this way, his bride might run away. "Shall we go out together later?" Eric asked, and Claire nodded. She went inside to pack a little, but then Daisy, from Madame White's side, arrived. "Greetings, Your Highness, the consort. My aunt has instructed me to inform you to report in a little while." Upon hearing this, Claire Crawford's face darkened. "Report in?" That likely means they want to reprimand her, right? Being a smart person, she certainly wouldn't obediently go in just to be scolded. "The prince has asked me to go out for a while. Do you want to come along?" Claire Crawford asked with a smile. A flash of resentment appeared in Daisy's eyes, revealing intense dissatisfaction. Being a woman herself, Claire Crawford understood the rare hint of hatred in Daisy's expression. "Your Highness, my aunt has instructed you to go over immediately." Daisy managed to stay at the Qin mansion because of Lady White. However, Claire Crawford was well aware that Daisy wanted to win Eric Stewart's affection.
Yet, Claire knew if Eric Stuart truly had such intentions, Daisy would have already succeeded in becoming his woman.
Since it hasn't happened, it won't happen at all. Oh? Then why don't you inform the prince?
Claire Crawford suggested, causing Daisy's expression to sour.
What did that mean? Daisy didn't want to confront Claire Crawford. She thought mentioning Lady White's name would at least prevent further comments, but unexpectedly, Claire brought up Eric Stuart instead. Your Highness, the prince sent me to ask if you've finished packing?
Seven Moon wisely inquired, noticing Claire speaking with Daisy and understanding Daisy's intentions.
I'm ready. If Daisy wants to join, she should ask the prince, right?
Claire intentionally said this to make it clear to Daisy not to harbor unrealistic expectations. However, Daisy dismissed it, saying, Your Highness, Daisy won't go, but Lady White might be upset if you leave.
Upset? Claire Crawford didn't believe so. Wouldn't Lady White be angry if she went to see her? Claire elegantly left with Eric Stuart, wearing a lavish outfit to deliberately provoke Daisy.
She wore a dark blue coat embroidered with auspicious patterns, a long black dress with grape designs, and a light blue sheer outer layer with vine motifs. Her long, glossy black hair was styled high, adorned with a ruby hairpin. She wore a gold bracelet with jade inlays, an imperial belt, carried a fragrant sachet, and donned thin-soled brocade shoes, looking exceptionally beautiful. She had the demeanor of a queen consort, but after leaving, Claire regretted it.
Why get angry over someone insignificant?
After leaving, unsure where to go, Eric Stuart suggested visiting the camp. It was the Dragon Boat Festival, but Claire wanted to visit her family's residence, so they parted ways. Claire Crawford rarely dressed so elegantly, yet she decided to take a casual stroll today. Unexpectedly, during her walk, she stumbled upon a violent encounter in a secluded area. The attackers were clad in black, highly skilled in martial arts, but the person they were after was Jade Stone, someone Claire Crawford knew.
Who had Jade Stone angered this time? Claire frowned,
but eventually decided to discreetly intervene, knowing that causing a commotion in the capital was unwise. Consequently, Jade Stone found himself indebted to Claire Crawford once again. The two of them sat in a small tavern, with Jade Stone nursing an injured arm.
Claire chuckled and said, I've saved you once more, remember to repay the favor.
She knew Jade Stone was no ordinary person, which is why she made such a comment. I will remember your great kindness, but when you say this, are you speaking on behalf of the Qin royal residence or yourself? Jade Stone was not foolish, since Claire was married to Qin Prince Eric Stuart, he naturally asked such a question.
Does it make a difference? Claire laughed. Jade Stone realized his question was somewhat redundant.
Claire, being married to Eric Stuart, was inevitably tied to the Qin royal residence, sharing in its fortunes and misfortunes.
Claire raised her glass and smiled, with an injured arm, can you still drink? Jade naturally took the drink, laughing, wine is the best medicine for wounds, why wouldn't I drink?
Afterward, Claire parted ways with Jade Stone. Before leaving, he remarked, you are truly different from the people of the Marquis's house, Claire Crawford. I hope you always remain this way and don't become like her. Jade Stone's clothes carried a faint scent of gardenias, reminiscent of the fragrance in Vincent Crawford's warm room. However, Claire had no intention of prying into others' affairs. Instead of returning to the Marquis's residence, Claire went straight to the military camp. The place where Eric Stuart stayed was not typically a destination women would willingly visit, being filled with rough men.
Upon seeing Claire, everyone stared intently. What are you looking at?
This is your princess, Eric Stuart said, displeased that others were ogling his wife. Everyone joined in a commotion, and then Eric Stuart and Claire sat by the fire. The men here were rough, and even the roasted meat was served in large chunks rather than delicately. Old Chief who then spoke, the princess must not be accustomed to this. We are all rough men here, used to life in the camp, eating large chunks of meat and drinking from big bowls.
It's normal for the Marquis's daughter to find it unfamiliar.
At first glance, it seemed like he was comforting her, but Old Chief who intentionally said this. In essence, he was implying that she couldn't handle hardship and wasn't suited for camp life. Eating large chunks of meat and drinking from big bowls was taboo for the women of the capital.
Claire simply smiled without saying anything.
Eric Stuart used a dagger to cut a piece of roasted meat for Claire, and she accepted it without hesitation, eating with one hand and drinking with the other, much to Old Chief Who's astonishment. Old Chief Who indeed changed his perception of Claire Crawford, having assumed she was reserved, only to find her unexpectedly generous in spirit. Chapter 75, but he is not in that evening. Claire Crawford was quite generous, perhaps due to the lively atmosphere at Quin's mansion. Claire Crawford managed to get Old Man Ho thoroughly drunk. Of course, Claire herself was a bit tipsy. This led to Eric Stuart carrying Claire back to Quin's mansion. On the way, Claire laughed and gazed at the moon, feeling a longing to return.
I want to go back now. The moon is beautiful, but you are not him.
In Claire's heart, she could only love one person. Therefore, in her eyes, Eric Stuart was not Lance Stuart, and she could never truly open her heart. She was merely projecting her guilt towards Lance onto Eric.
Eric, carrying Claire, felt unhappy.
To him, Claire was already his wife, but knowing she held another man in her heart made it impossible for him to be happy.
Unexpectedly, they encountered an uninvited guest along the way, Prince Lance. It's been a long time. Beside Prince Lance was another familiar face, Jade Stone.
Eric, already displeased, was now even more so.
Prince Lance, indeed, it's been a while. Reluctantly, Eric had to set Claire down. Although Prince Lance also admired Claire, he still somewhat looked down on Eric. What was this? No matter how much he liked her, a woman was just that. Eric, disregarding his status, carried her like that. Wasn't he afraid of being laughed at? Is Lady Qin drunk? You are quite patient, Prince Lance remarked.
He had intentionally brought Jade Stone to confront Eric, to show that Jade was on his side. But clearly, Prince Lance was jealous. Before he could dwell on his jealousy, Claire spoke up. Is His Highness Prince Lance jealous? Don't be. Look at you. If you can't have it, just let it go. My prince won't mind. After saying this, Claire gave Eric a nudge. Although Eric was angry that Claire still had someone else in her heart, he knew that between him and anyone else, Claire would choose him. So, even though Eric didn't know who Claire's heart belonged to, at least they were on the same side now. Feeling more at ease, Eric smiled and said, "That's right, Prince Lance, rest assured, your past affection for Claire is water under the bridge for me."
Prince Lance's expression turned sour. He couldn't simply let it go. Even though he didn't voice it, he subconsciously wanted to compare himself to Eric. Despite knowing that Eric was nothing to him, unloved by both parents, what was he? Prince Lance, who had always been in the spotlight, supported by his mother, couldn't understand why he lost. Why did Claire choose someone like Eric? He couldn't fathom why the Crawford family allowed such a match. Jade Stone, standing with Prince Lance, aren't you afraid of being misunderstood? Claire laughed, knowing that Prince Lance must have promised Jade something. But some things weren't as they seemed. Claire, being clever, glanced at Eric, who understood immediately to shield her from Prince Lance. Jade Stone, others' misunderstanding is one thing, but if the Qin Prince misunderstands, what will you do? Think carefully. If those who have protected you for years misunderstand your allegiance, what would you do? Claire Crawford's thoughts were clear. Even though she had been drinking, she knew how to exploit Jade Stone's weaknesses. Jade Stone managed to survive in the Marquis residence, and even though Lord Crawford wanted to kill Jade Stone, he dared not act openly. This suggested that the Emperor was hinting at Lord Crawford to protect Jade Stone. Therefore, Jade Stone could offend anyone, but if he crossed the Emperor, he would truly have no escape. At this moment, Jade Stone was quite aware of his situation. He smiled and said, "What are you saying, Claire? I met Prince Lance on my way here to visit you. I heard this little drunkard was intoxicated, so I was just worried about you." Claire Crawford laughed, as did Eric Stuart. Jade Stone was a cunning old fox, but Prince Lance wasn't foolish either. Prince Lance naturally understood what Jade Stone was concerned about. What he promised was not enough for Jade Stone to submit to him, but Prince Lance also knew that if Jade Stone didn't choose him, he certainly wouldn't choose Eric Stuart. So he didn't worry too much. On the way back to the Qin estate, Claire Crawford felt that the night's drinking had been in vain. She initially thought that drinking would help her stop overthinking, but unexpectedly, she encountered Prince Lance. After resolving the issue with Jade Stone, Claire Crawford sobered up.
"Walk a bit slower," Eric Stewart, who had been following behind her, said, noticing that she was walking too fast. There were many steps in the Qin estate, and he was worried she might fall.
However, Claire Crawford was already sober. She turned to Eric Stewart and said, "Jade Stone will not easily choose Prince Lance. Today I saved his life, he's probably with Prince Lance to avoid assassins." Eric Stewart nodded, ready to support her if needed.
But Claire Crawford avoided him.
"I'm talking to you, don't look at me like you're protecting a kitten." Claire Crawford was displeased with how cautious he was being.
Just as she finished speaking, she noticed Lady White being helped out by Daisy.
Oh dear. Claire Crawford felt her rare good mood was completely ruined. "Oh dear, I'm feeling a bit dizzy, my lord, please help me." With that, Claire Crawford quickly leaned into Eric Stewart's arms.
A great man knows when to bend and when to stand firm. Claire truly acted as if she were fainting, allowing Eric Stewart to hold her in his embrace.
"Aunt, why are you still up so late?"
Eric Stewart asked, unable to say much to his aunt, who had taken care of him for many years. In the Qin estate, her opinion mattered. Lady White glanced at Claire Crawford, feeling she lacked propriety. After all, she was the Qin princess.
How could she let Eric Stewart hold her like that?
This is the Qin estate, and in the Qin estate, there are rules. If you spoil her like this, she'll eventually overstep her bounds.
Eric Stewart, pretending not to care, replied, "Aunt, it's fine.
A wife should be cherished.
You know how tragic my mother's life was, I won't let my wife follow the same path." Seeing Eric Stewart's stance, Lady White could only temporarily relent. Once Eric Stewart carried Claire into the inner quarters, he said, "Aren't you going to get up? Aunt has left. Don't worry, once she gets to know you, she won't oppose you anymore." But despite Eric Stewart's words, Claire Crawford didn't respond.
He thought she was angry, but when he looked down, he found she had fallen asleep.
You. Eric Stewart chuckled fondly, finally placing her on the bed.
Willow Green brought in water for washing, but seeing Claire asleep, she hesitated. If the lady wakes up tomorrow and finds she hasn't washed her face, she might be upset. After a moment of hesitation, she saw Eric Stewart, resigned, wetting a washcloth to clean Claire's face himself.
This was the prince.
Willow Green never expected that Eric Stewart, the esteemed Prince of Qin, would personally wash her lady's face, showing such tenderness. She truly felt she hadn't chosen wrongly. The Prince of Qin was much better than Prince Lance. Claire occasionally threw tantrums, but Eric Stewart only responded with affectionate smiles, never getting angry. In truth, Claire briefly woke up, but seeing Eric Stewart, she went back to sleep. In her subconscious, she had come to trust Eric Stewart the most, so she didn't guard against him. Chapter 76, not allowing her to eat food given by another man the next day, Claire Crawford woke up to find the sun already high in the sky. Willow Green, standing nearby, dared not speak, while Claire felt parched. "Willow Green, pour me some water, I'm dying of thirst," Claire said. Willow Green quickly poured a cup of water and handed it over. Then, she subtly signaled to her mistress. "What's going on?" Claire asked after downing the large cup but still feeling thirsty. Willow Green kept signaling, indicating something serious. Claire couldn't figure out the issue until she stood up and saw Lady White and Daisy sitting there, staring at her like ghosts. "Oh my, ghosts." Claire swore she didn't mean to blurt out anything inappropriate. The two remained silent, just staring at her, which was truly frightening. "No, Aunt, what are you doing?" Claire felt dizzy just standing up. Although she claimed to have sobered up yesterday, she only felt clear-headed. After drinking so much, she still felt lightheaded now. Seeing Lady White there only added to her irritation. "It's the Qin Duchess. How dare you drink outside and show such disrespect? Do you admit your fault?" Lady White glared at her, eyes filled with anger. But Claire's head was pounding, leaving her with no energy to deal with the woman. "Duchess Qin, you must know the rules of Qin's residence cannot be so lax. How can you get drunk and let the Duke carry you back? You even let him carry you to your room," Daisy added, clearly prompted by Lady White. Looking at Claire with disdain, she continued, as the Duchess of Qin, you knowingly violated the rules of Qin's residence. You are to kneel in the main hall and pray for the Duke's well-being.
Pray? Pray for Eric Stuart?
Eric should indeed live a long life, but certainly not because she begged for it on her knees.
Sorry, Aunt, I drank too much with the Duke last night. There's no need to kneel in the main hall.
If you think I broke the rules of Qin's residence, let the Duke punish me himself. Claire initially intended to speak politely with Lady White, but now, she had no patience for it. Her head was killing her, and this old woman wanted her to kneel as punishment.
Kneel, my foot.
As soon as Claire finished speaking, someone came from outside and said, Lady White, Duchess, there is a guest outside wishing to see the Duchess. Lady White was quite traditional, believing that as a woman, one should not entertain visitors like a man would.
Before Claire Crawford could speak, Daisy interjected, who is it?
The guard was momentarily stunned before responding, Miss Daisy, it is a young gentleman who says his surname is Stone.
Jade Stone?
Claire Crawford was genuinely surprised that Jade Stone had come to see her. Although she had been drinking the night before, she clearly remembered everything she did and said. Prince Qin is not at the residence, and the princess should not meet with any gentleman. Daisy's words were clearly directed at Claire Crawford, her tone dripping with jealousy. Bring Mr. Stone to the main hall, I'll be there shortly. Claire Crawford dismissed Daisy's comments. In the Qin residence, she was the lady of the house. Although Lady White did not favor Claire Crawford, she would not embarrass her in front of outsiders. Therefore, Lady White did not prevent Claire Crawford from meeting the visitor. Jade Stone brought breakfast, the finest wontons from First Tower. Knowing you'd have a headache this morning, come, try these wontons.
Jade Stone acted as if he were at home, which left Claire Crawford slightly taken aback. Wasn't he siding with Prince Lance last night? What was his intention in coming to the Qin residence now? Claire Crawford wasn't overly cautious, after all, a bowl of wontons from Jade Stone wouldn't be poisoned. She just couldn't figure out what he was up to. If you don't start talking, I'm leaving. Claire Crawford, being quite shrewd, knew Jade Stone had something to say. However, she wasn't sure what it was. But when she looked up, she saw his face flushed red. What was going on? Why was he blushing in the middle of a conversation? In the past, I always avoided interacting with you at the Marquis residence. Now, I just want to ask you, are you willingly marrying into the Qin royal residence? Jade Stone asked, leaving Claire Crawford stunned. What was he asking? She thought he would inquire about Eric Stuart or Prince Lance, but instead, he asked such a personal question. Seeing Claire Crawford's silence, Jade Stone continued, or I can put it this way, I owe you a few lives, and I can take you away. Before he could finish, Eric Stuart returned. Do you think you can just take my Qin royal consort away? Eric Stuart sensed a threat. Someone was eyeing his consort, and if he could tolerate that, he wouldn't be a real man. As long as she wishes, I can take her away. Jade Stone, usually smiling, could be quite intimidating when angry. Compared to Prince Lance, Jade Stone was indeed a formidable opponent. But before Eric Stuart could respond, Claire Crawford grabbed his hand. Jade brother, you are from the Marquis residence, my elder brother. Marrying the Qin king is my wish, he loves me, and I love him. I don't want to leave the Qin royal residence. Jade Stone smiled at Claire Crawford. His life had always been about unfulfilled desires, ending in mockery. Then you must treat her well. If one day you mistreat her, I will take her away. With that, Jade Stone left immediately. Claire Crawford was a bit confused. Was he here just to take her away? Still bewildered, she was about to sit down and continue eating the dumplings Jade Stone brought, but Eric Stuart stopped her. You are not allowed to eat food given by other men. Eric Stuart, with a childish jealousy, moved the bowl of dumplings away, not even one bite. Claire Crawford looked at Eric Stuart, finding him endearing. Fine, if she couldn't eat, she wouldn't. However, she needed to deal with the people in her own my garden. I'm wholeheartedly devoted to you, but if you mistreat me and let others bully me repeatedly, I will let my Jade brother take me away, Claire Crawford said deliberately, clearly teasing. Eric Stuart took it seriously.
Jade Stone had already confronted him, how could he pretend otherwise? Returning to Why My Garden, Claire Crawford complained of dizziness, prompting Lady White and Daisy to come out.
Daisy was genuinely surprised to see Eric Stewart.
She looked at him as if he were a delicious piece of meat.
"Aunt, if you're unwell, why are you in Why My Garden?"
"Daisy, if you don't serve Aunt well, I'll find someone else to do it," Eric Stewart said, making it clear to Lady White that Daisy had ulterior motives. Previously, Eric Stewart was lazy about managing things, but today Claire Crawford subtly hinted at issues. On the way, Eric Stewart pondered how he could win her heart if people weren't comfortable in his residence. The more he thought, the more troubled he became, deciding to address the situation with Daisy. "All right, Aunt understands you want to protect her, but the Qin royal residence has its rules. You're the Qin king, the head of the house, and you should know not to spoil others, lest you regret it later." In truth, Lady White wanted to suggest removing Claire Crawford from her position as Qin royal consort and replacing her. Recently, she had repeatedly caused trouble for Claire Crawford. Seeing Eric Stewart's protection of Claire Crawford now made her feel that Claire Crawford should not remain. After all, Eric Stewart was destined for great things and could not be delayed by a woman. They say beautiful women bring disaster, and Lady White looked at Claire Crawford, always feeling she was no good. Chapter 77, returning to her mother's home in anger after that day, following Eric Stewart's words, Lady White indeed remained silent for a while. Until one morning, Lady White was assisted by Daisy to the Why My Garden.
"Aunt!"
Claire Crawford greeted Lady White with a smile, but it didn't mean she welcomed her presence.
"Last night, I dreamed of my sister. Her only wish was for Eric to have a son. I've consulted a doctor for Daisy, and she is very suitable for bearing a son." "So what?" Claire Crawford now understood why Lady White had come to see her. It was clear she intended to make Daisy a concubine in the Qin estate. "You are the Qin princess, so consider yourself informed," Lady White said before leaving. No wonder Daisy seemed different today. She wore her hair in a Qin hack style, adorned with a jade hairpin set with blue sapphires. She held a six-sided silk fan, dressed in a red robe embroidered with light purple fish scales dragging on the ground, and wore shoes embroidered with cloud patterns. Oh dear, she's set on becoming a concubine of the Qin estate. Daisy pays respects to sister. Daisy noticed Claire Crawford's changing expression and knew she had succeeded. She hoped Claire would strike her, even harm her, so she could successfully play the victim. "Sister princess, don't be angry. Aunt loves me, which is why she wants me to be a concubine in the Qin estate. Rest assured, I won't compete with you for the prince's affections. I just admire him." Daisy spoke with pride, seeing Claire Crawford's apparent anger, feeling her plan was about to succeed. However, unfortunately, Daisy's little tricks were hardly worth mentioning. How could Claire Crawford not see through Daisy's schemes? "Daisy, your words are mistaken. Allow me to remind you, first, you are not yet a concubine of the Qin estate, this decision is solely the prince's to make. Second, my mother only had me as her daughter, and my father has 3 daughters, with me being the youngest. I have no younger sister, so don't call me sister." Claire Crawford was actually reluctant to deal with such women. She came to the Qin estate to support Eric Stewart, not to fight. Unfortunately, Daisy had become too presumptuous, so Claire saw no need to maintain appearances. Daisy never expected Claire to respond so sharply. Claire Crawford had always been suppressed by Lady White, appearing easy to bully. But why today was she not letting Daisy in? "Sister princess." Slap. Claire Crawford, in front of everyone, raised her hand and slapped Daisy. "Didn't you hear clearly? I have no younger sister, and you are not my sister. Think carefully before you speak again." Afterwards, Claire Crawford took her seat, and Willow Green's demeanor became much more confident. Recently, Willow Green had been oppressed by Daisy, as many in the Qin estate were Daisy's people, making things difficult for her. Seeing Claire Crawford stand up to Daisy today, Willow Green was truly overjoyed. Daisy's eyes filled with tears, looking pitifully at Claire Crawford, she said, "Princess, this was Aunt's decision." Meaning, Lady White had agreed, so Claire had no right to disagree. Claire Crawford smiled and said, "Oh? Is that so? Is the Qin estate run by Aunt? No matter what, the Qin mansion is under her control. So, even if it's Lady White, what of it? If Eric Stuart doesn't agree, can Lady White force him? Yes. Daisy looked at Claire Crawford, not knowing how many times she had tried, just hoping to become Eric Stuart's secondary wife. She was aware that she couldn't be the main wife, so she only sought the title of secondary wife. But if Claire Crawford didn't agree, then she couldn't be blamed. Honestly, wasn't Claire Crawford just a concubine's daughter too? What right did she have to sit in the position of the Qin Duchess? Lady White had never liked her, and now was the perfect time. She had to seize this opportunity. Yes? Then you're mistaken. In the Qin mansion, the master is the Qin Duke, and in the inner court, I am the master. Do you think the title of Duchess, given to me by the Emperor for my battlefield merits, is false? Claire Crawford squinted, glancing at Daisy. She had thought that marrying into the Qin mansion, she could turn a blind eye and quietly help Eric Stuart secure his position, allowing herself to retreat unscathed. Now it seemed she had underestimated the situation. As the saying goes, if you don't seek trouble, trouble will find you. Isn't that the case? Trouble had indeed arrived. What a nuisance. Daisy still didn't grasp Claire Crawford's meaning but couldn't swallow the insult of being slapped without reason. Thus, she angrily looked at Claire Crawford and said, Duchess, no matter what, you can't be so jealous. My aunt said I should be the secondary wife to serve the Duke, and that's not something you can decide. Daisy clung to Lady White's instructions, clearly not understanding her own status. Claire Crawford chuckled coldly and then ordered, Willow Green, call in the guards. Tell them Daisy has been disrespectful and insulted the Duchess. She is to kneel in the main courtyard for 3 hours and await the Duke's return for further handling. After Claire Crawford gave her orders, Willow Green immediately called in the guards. It was only then that Daisy realized Claire Crawford meant what she said. But now she was so frightened that she hurriedly said, Your Grace, you can't treat me like this, my aunt said. Unfortunately, no one listened to Daisy, and whatever she said was useless. She needed to understand who was in charge in the Qin mansion and whose words mattered. Next, it was time to stir up some waves. So, Claire Crawford packed up a bit and returned to the Marquis's mansion. She believed Eric Stuart would know what to do. It wasn't until Eric Stuart returned to the Qin mansion that he was informed of everything that had happened that day. Poor Daisy was kneeling in the main courtyard, with someone supervising her, while Lady White was furious, seemingly sulking with Claire Crawford. Duke! Daisy saw Eric Stuart and immediately began to cry, thinking he would pity her. However, Daisy was mistaken. Eric Stuart simply stepped past Daisy and went into Lady White's room. Aunt! As soon as Eric Stuart addressed her, Lady White sighed deeply. It was clear she was angry and said, You're grown now, and this old woman can't control you anymore. From now on, the Qin mansion is yours to manage. Tomorrow, I'll pack up and go to the mountains to pray for you, never to come down again. Eric Stuart's head throbbed. If household matters weren't handled well, peace would be elusive. Aunt, you're my blood relative, the one who loves me most. How can you not understand certain things? Eric Stuart's words displeased Lady White. What did he mean by she didn't understand? Of course, she understood. Claire Crawford was just a concubine's daughter and unworthy of the Duchess' position. Naturally, she favored Daisy, a child she had watched grow up. What did I do wrong? With her temperament, how can she take care of you well? Daisy is someone I watched grow up, the most sensible one. Only with Daisy caring for you can I be at ease. Eric Stuart had no choice but to play his trump card. Claire Crawford had returned to the Marquis's mansion, and even if she were brought back, his aunt would likely continue causing trouble. In that case, he might as well change his approach, possibly altering her perspective. Aunt, do you know why I married her? Why I made her the Duchess? Lady White had never considered these questions. Seeing Eric Stuart's serious demeanor, she was somewhat reluctant and huffed, It's naturally because she's a vixen, and you're bewitched by her beauty. Marry for virtue, you must understand that. I see nothing virtuous in her, unlike Daisy, who is at least devoted to you.
Chapter 78, Time to Bring Home the Wife. Daisy, Eric Stewart now finds it exhausting just to hear her name, let alone meet her.
What kind of spell has his aunt fallen under? Aunt, let me tell you this, do you know why the emperor granted her such a title? Eric Stewart began to use his charm to persuade his aunt. As expected, the old lady fell for it and replied, "Isn't she the Princess Serena? Could she be more prestigious than you?"
"Aunt, she is the Princess Serena personally titled by the emperor, and she earned it by leading troops to victory in the northwest. I need a noblewoman who is virtuous and gentle, but her status is different. She can draw the emperor's bow, she can fight on the battlefield, and she has the support of the Marquis household. Marquis Crawford commands the royal armored troops."
"Aunt, she alone is worth many, don't you think the position of queen consort is meant for her?"
With this explanation, Lady White started to see the potential of Claire Crawford as the queen consort. She hadn't thought about it that way before, only considering that a woman should be virtuous and gentle, and ideally, bear a son for Eric Stewart. But now, realizing Claire Crawford's noble status and capability, she acknowledged that Claire was more suitable than Daisy to support Eric Stewart. "And, you see, she's already been provoked to return to the Marquis household.
I truly don't like Daisy, who spends all day urging you to climb into my bed. What good could come of that?"
Lady White was about to argue, but Eric Stewart continued, "Aunt, I know her intentions well. Without her whispering in your ear, you wouldn't have thought of putting her in my bed. With such thoughts, the Qin royal mansion cannot tolerate it. I will deal with Daisy and personally welcome the princess back to the Qin royal mansion." At this, Lady White had nothing more to say.
Ultimately, Eric Stewart indeed made a valid point, and it was true.
Previously, she hadn't noticed, but now she suddenly realized that Daisy truly intended to serve her for a lifetime. It was also Daisy who spoke about trivial matters concerning Claire Crawford, which only made her angrier, feeling that Claire Crawford was unworthy of being the Qin Duchess.
"Alright then, you've grown up, you can make your own decisions about these things, as long as you understand them in your heart," Lady White said, and only then did Eric Stewart smile. One had to admire Claire Crawford's cleverness. When leaving, Lady White did not follow, and Daisy cried for a while, looking up to see only Eric Stewart. "Your Grace." Daisy was momentarily stunned. Why didn't Lady White come out as well? Before she could think further, Eric Stewart instructed, "Lift your head, let me take a good look at you. You've been serving by my aunt's side for so long, and I've never really looked at you." Hearing this, Daisy thought she had hope. Frankly, Eric Stewart had been somewhat indifferent before and didn't show much affection towards other women. But it didn't matter. As long as Eric Stewart agreed to make her a concubine this time, she would do everything to make him see her differently in the future. So, she shyly lifted her head. Eric Stewart observed her carefully for a while, then chuckled, saying, "Indeed, a face as pretty as a flower and a clever tongue, no wonder you could persuade my aunt." Daisy was taken aback by these words, feeling a bit scared. Eric Stewart was usually quite easygoing, at least he had a handsome smile, and in front of Lady White, he was well-mannered. Therefore, Daisy naturally believed that the rumors outside were not true. Stories of Eric Stewart's bad temper and drunkenly beating maids to death were false. But now, seeing Eric Stewart's grim expression, she was genuinely frightened. "Why don't you answer? Are you happy that my Duchess left?" Eric Stewart squinted and asked Daisy, who really didn't dare to respond. She just knelt on the ground, hurriedly apologizing, "Your Grace, I know I was wrong, I truly know I was wrong." Though she was Lady White's adopted daughter and others called her Miss, she never dared to call Eric Stewart brother. Therefore, she was very aware of her status and position, knowing that in the Qin Duke's residence, she was merely a servant. Now, it was even clearer to her. Why call yourself a servant? Didn't you want to be my concubine? Didn't you want to climb into my bed? How can someone as pure as you arouse my interest? Eric Stewart said, raising an eyebrow, clearly feeling disgusted. He had previously thought Daisy was well-behaved, not expecting her to harbor such dirty intentions towards him. Today, he would use Daisy to show everyone in the Qin Duke's residence that his bed wasn't easy to climb into. "I dare not, Your Grace, I dare not anymore," Daisy said, kneeling on the ground, crying pitifully.
If you know you're wrong, then kneel in the main courtyard, let the entire Qin Duke's residence see what happens when you have improper thoughts and how you should be punished. After giving his orders, Daisy was immediately taken to the main courtyard to kneel in the middle. Eric Stewart left with 7 Moon, carrying large and small bags, filling the entire carriage.
Your Grace, is it necessary to do this?
7 Moon was truly surprised. It seemed like half of the Qin Duke's residence was being emptied.
Eric Stewart, unconcerned, said, "Why? I'm going to pick up my wife, shouldn't it be grand?"
Well then, 7 Moon thought, this spectacle was indeed grand, those unaware might think he was marrying again. The carriage slowly arrived at the Marquis residence, where Claire Crawford was talking with Marquis Crawford, mostly discussing how much Eric Stewart missed Marquis Crawford and was preparing for the future.